album ID. So once they have been checked for their existence, if they've been set, we now need to redefine the variables, and we need to access several elements from this image array here, this files array. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we first of all need to determine the image name. Second of all, we need to determine the image size, because we're going to have a maximum upload size of 2 megabytes. And we also need to access the temporary name of the file, where it's located on the server, and we can then actually move this and upload it to the relevant folder. So this is $_files, and again we've called it images. Now after this we need to use some more square brackets, and the name is name. So this will give the file name that's been uploaded. Okay, so the file size $_files, image again, and after this it's size. Image temp is $_files, again we're accessing the files array, and that's the image. And this is tmp_name. Now if you haven't looked at file uploading before and you're unfamiliar with it, there are some tutorials, PHP Academy tutorials, that show you how to do this and show you how to do it securely. We're obviously going to be doing this securely in this tutorial, but if you want some further information on this, then go ahead and watch that video. So we're going to now create an array of allowed extensions. Now we're allowing JPEG, JPG, PNG and GIF. We're allowing these 3 file types, and we're making an exception for JPEG because it can be spelled either JPEG or just JPG. So now we need to create an array that will hold these values, and then we can compare them a bit later on. So I'm going to create a new variable called allowed_ext, and this is going to be equal to an array. Now the values we want, we have 4, remember. The first one is JPG, then JPEG, PNG, and finally GIF. So we've created an array that contains these, and we can use this to check a bit later on with the inArray function. Now the image extension is slightly more complicated. We need to retrieve the image extension from the name. As you might know, there is also a way to grab the image type from the files array. However, this is often insecure and not as effective. So the first thing we want to do is explode the image name, and we're going to separate that by a dot, because obviously we have a dot at the end of our file name and then the file extension. So we're exploding image name by a dot, and with this result we will get an array returned. Image ext will now be an array, and it will contain everything separated by a dot. Now obviously this isn't going to work because we only want the last element of this new image ext array. So we use the end function to pick the end element of this array. So let's say we upload a file called photo.jpg. The explode function will separate this into an element called photo, or with the value photo, and the element JPG. So the file name and then the file extension. We use end to then retrieve the last value, which would just be JPG in the example I've given. Now we also need to take into account that file names or file extensions can be uppercase as well, so we need to convert this to lower. So we can use the str to lower function and actually lowercase, so we can compare against these properly. Okay, so now we need to grab the album ID, and that's from our post variable, and that's album ID. Remember where the user selects the album ID just here. And let's go back up to the code. Okay, so now we need to do several checks. So let's go ahead and actually create an array called errors. And we've seen this technique before. This is just going to hold an array of our errors. The first thing we want to do is obviously check if the values are empty. So if for some reason the user hasn't selected a file, or for some reason they've modified the form to not include a album ID. So we need to check first of all for empty image name, and then we need to check for empty album ID. If either of these are empty, we need to create a new error, and that is we'll just say something is missing. The reason I'm just writing something is missing, it's not really a very user-friendly error, and the only reason for this is that the user would have modified the form in order to see this error. So we do that just generally, so if they do try and modify the form, we catch them out of this stage. Now inside the else block, we're going to create a variety of checks. So we've got 4 checks, I think, to do, or no, 3 checks to do. The first one is the file extension. We need to check the file extension. So we use the inArray function, and this checks the file extension against the allowed text array. So if we, for example, have an exe file, an executable file, then we obviously will not allow it. If we have a JPEG or a JPEG, then we will allow it. So we need to check for inArray. So the first parameter is the image extension itself. This is what you're looking for, and the second parameter is where you're looking in. So that's the allowed extension array. Now if this is equal to false, that means that our image extension hasn't been found in this following array. So we can print out an error, or create an error inside of this array, a new element. So we just say file type not allowed. Now the next check is to check the image size. So we say if image size is greater than, and it's 2 megabytes, so this is 2097152, I believe. Let's just double check that. 2097152, yeah, so that's 2 megabytes in bytes. This is essentially just checking that it's if it is greater than 2 megabytes. So if it is greater than 2 megabytes, we have an error because the maximum file size is 2 megabytes. So we can say maximum file size is 2 megabytes. The third check and the final check is checking if our album belongs to our user. Now this is extremely important because users might go ahead and modify this album ID in here and actually upload images to an album that doesn't belong to them. So we need to use the album check function, as we've already discussed in previous parts, to check if the album belongs to the user. So we say if album check, and what we are checking for is album ID. If this is equal to false, then this means that the album does not belong to the currently logged in user. So we can say errors equals couldn't upload to that album, and because I've used a inverted comma or a single quotation mark, I've escaped that data there. So now that our checks are complete, we can come down here and actually echo them out if we do have any. So we're going to say, as we've done before, if not empty errors, we do something, otherwise we do something else. So if the album errors or if the errors array is not empty, we're going to loop through the errors. So for each errors as error, we're going to echo the errors that we find, followed by a line break. Otherwise, we are going to upload the image. Let's just go ahead and check this. So coming over to our browser, we can now start to choose a file and choose an album and just see if the errors are passed. Now if the errors are passed, that means that we'll go ahead and process the file upload, which we haven't got to just yet. So I've gone ahead and clicked choose file. Let's choose say flowers.jpg. Now this is a valid file because it's under 2 megabytes and it has a JPG extension. Let's double click on that, or click on that, and we'll choose an album. So I'll choose general just to test. If I click upload, we have no errors. We've refreshed the page, we haven't actually uploaded the image, but we'll get to that a bit later. So what happens if we choose a file that is not an image? So in this case, we will actually return one or more errors. So let's go ahead and try this. I've clicked choose file. I'm going to choose a document which is 18 kilobytes. So the file extension is incorrect, and this is not allowed, but the file size is. So let's go ahead and attempt to upload that. Okay, so we've got file type not allowed. So we've disallowed the user to upload a document, file. Now let's choose this file, page1.avi, which is a PHP Academy tutorial, a pagination tutorial or pagination tutorial. The size is 12.2 megabytes and it has an AVI extension. So when we try to upload this, click upload in the browser and we get two errors: file type is not allowed and maximum file size is 2 megabytes. So now that we've tested this, feel free to go ahead in your own time and test manually changing the ID fields or the ID attributes in this field, as well as a variety of other things. But the checks that you have in place should protect against, well, will protect against people uploading files that are not images or uploading to other albums, considering we use the album check function here. So to upload the image, what do we need to do? Well, we need to call the upload image function, which we haven't yet created and we will get to in a moment. We need to pass 3 variables to this. So let's just go ahead and open up that image.func.php file. Now we've got the upload image function here, which takes the image temporary name, the image extension and the album ID. So it's important that we supply these 3 parameters to enable us to actually upload the image. So let's go ahead and actually put these into the function, although we haven't created it. So the first is image temp. That's the file that we took from the temporary location that we took from the files array. That's image temp. Again, the next one is the image extension, and this is just image ext. Remember, we created that just here. And the third one is the album ID, which is pretty straightforward. It's just the album ID. The next thing we want to do is locate the user to another file. So what we're doing is we are redirecting them essentially to view album.php, which we haven't yet created. This is just a document or a page, I guess, that just lets the user browse what they've uploaded to a specific album. And we want to give an album ID, and we want that to equal .album ID, so we're appending on the album ID. So that will forward us to this page, which doesn't yet exist. However, we will be creating that soon. Okay, so now that we've got this done, we need to actually go ahead and create this upload image function. The first thing I'm going to do is actually include the thumb.func.php so we can see what attributes, or sorry, which parameters this function takes.